5 weeks in a row talking about audio tools, focusing on one tool each week. So this week it's compression. We're starting out with compressors. What is a compressor? What does it do? Why use it? That kind of thing. Hi, happy Friday to you. I'm so glad you've tuned in to another video of mine. Each and every one of you that chooses to subscribe to this channel, I feel like you're joining a family. We're all in this together, spreading the audio gospel as one to the world and chasing greatness. So today I'm kicking off a 5-part series about audio tools, and specifically audio tools for video. If you follow me at all in this year-long journey of posting videos to YouTube, you know that I talk a lot about audio for video. And many of you that have been with me do find that audio stuff helpful. I find it helpful, so here we go. Generally, a compressor is a dynamics processor. All that means is it manipulates the amplitude of an audio signal. So it'll manipulate how loud the signal is over time. That's what a dynamics processor refers to. If you hear dynamic range in the context of audio, it's talking about how low are the lows and how high are the highs. High dynamic range in audio refers to the fact that there are really soft parts in your audio and really loud parts in your audio. Probably clipped a little bit. But the whole point of a compressor is to decrease the dynamic range, taking the signal down, making it more even over time. Now, there are 5 parameters to a compressor that you need to be aware of. Whether you're using a stock plugin in Adobe Audition or Premiere, or you're in the Apple side of things and you use Logic or Final Cut, or you're using something else like Reaper. I don't know, what are the other programs out there? Windows Movie Maker. Those 5 parameters you need to know about are threshold, ratio, attack, release, and knee. Knee is not as important, but we're going to cover it anyway. So before we even get going, let's think about a river. So we have a river right now. Pretend like you're looking at a river. And what happens in a river? All this water is moving across the screen. Water is moving from point A to point B. But as that water moves, it splashes up and it comes back down. Splashes up, comes back down. Maybe it hits a rock, you get some white caps, you get the idea. There's a river, it's wild and crazy river. So let's pretend like that river is a stream of audio moving through a compressor. So now we're going to visualize what a compressor does to that water so that you can learn about what it does to the actual signal. So as this water is flowing by, the first parameter we're going to talk about is the threshold. A threshold is like a dotted line moving across that plane, across that water, across that audio signal. You can move it up and you can move it down. All that threshold is telling the compressor when to turn on and when to turn back off. So let's just pretend that we set that threshold at -20 dBFS. Anytime that water peaks above -20, the compressor turns on. Anytime that water goes beneath -20, the compressor turns off. That's as simple as that for a threshold. That is just the point at which the compressor turns on and turns off. So the lower your threshold, the more active the compressor will be because it's getting deeper into the signal. Does that make sense? So if you set it very low, it's going to be acting on all of your audio because rarely are you going to have audio that peaks under it. If you set that threshold really high at like -1, it may not ever even touch your audio. Makes sense? Threshold. Moving on. Now the next parameter is called ratio, and this is simply a measure of how much do we pull that water down? How much do we push that water back down when it crosses the threshold? So it's like a backwards division problem. So if it's 2 to 1, that means it's going to be half as big. If it's 4 to 1, that means it's gonna pull it down to a quarter of its original size. If it's 8 to 1, it's gonna pull it to 1/8 of its original size. So again, imagine that water hitting that threshold, and then the compressor measures that water as it goes above that threshold and applies a diminishment of the water based on that ratio. Are you still with me here? So if that ratio is 2 to 1, if that water goes up 4 decibels above the threshold, the compressor is going to act and pull it down to only 2 decibels above the threshold. So as that water comes up, it's going to be pulled to 2 and back down. Water comes up, pulled to 2 and back down. Water comes up, pulled to half its original size and back down. Let me give you an example from real world here. Usually when I'm compressing dialogue, the first compressor I apply is a 4 to 1 ratio, meaning anything that goes above the threshold is compressed at a quarter of its original amplitude, a quarter of what it originally was. So say it hits -10 as our threshold and it goes all the way up to 0, it's going to be compressed all the way down to 2.5 decibels above 10, which would be 7.5. So the original signal that peaked at 0, hitting the threshold at a ratio of 4 to 1 would only peak at -7.5. It's a quarter of the amplitude that it originally was based on that ratio. Recap real quick. Threshold, when does the compressor turn on? Ratio, how much are we pulling the signal back when it crosses the threshold? Okay, you still with me? If you're with me, give me a like. The next parameter here we're gonna actually do together, attack and release. This is just a measure of how quickly the compressor turns on and how quickly the compressor turns off when the audio interacts with that threshold. So again, if we're using our river analogy here, when that water goes up above the threshold that we designated, how quickly is it gonna compress by the ratio? And then how quickly is it gonna let it go back to where it was underneath? So usually I just leave these set at auto. If you do too quick of an attack, you can get distortion. If you do too quick of a release, you can get distortion. Unless you're getting into crazy advanced work, you don't need to worry about your attack and release with the compressor tool. The final parameter you need to know about is called the knee. The knee. And that's exactly what it is. It's a knee. It's actually a knee shape. It's talking about the point at which the audio hits that threshold and you apply your ratios, attacks, and releases, like all of that working together. How hard does it kick in, or how gentle and soft does it kick in? That's why you'll hear people refer to a hard knee compressor or a soft knee compressor, and it's truly the shape on the mathematical graph of the compression. It's the shape at which the compressor kicks in, and it's only referring to the signal not being compressed to the signal being compressed, that point at which they connect. That's what the knee is. How sharp does that signal actually become compressed, or how soft? It's not a measure of the attack. It's not a measure of the ratio. Those things all left as they are. The knee is simply at the point at which the audio becomes compressed. Does it happen softly or does it happen harshly? Does that make any sense? Hopefully I've drawn that well out on some graphs, on some charts, on some pieces of paper. That's a compressor. That's how it works. We use these in audio all the time for dialogue, for music, for mastering, for everything. It's arguably the most important tool in audio mixing and processing when it comes to video, music, anything, anywhere, a compressor. In essence, the most simple way to explain practically why to use a compressor, it's gonna even out the signal. Just make it more cohesive, more together. Like when you hear a really good produced voiceover and it sounds like the voice is just right in front of you, right on your ears, not changing, even if the voice is going up and down in energy, that's just really good compression. Hopefully that makes some sense. That is a compressor in a nutshell. This is part 1 of 5 of my quick little audio series. For the next 4 weeks after this, we're going to be covering other tools: EQs, limiters, gates, DeEssers. That's it. That's all of them. So thanks so much for watching. Hit like. I appreciate all of you. If you want to interact outside of this video, go follow me on Twitter at Oliver J. Hughes. Love to talk to you there. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. You know how I like to interact with keyboards. It's how we talk in 2017. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.